Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and the Harvard Classics. This is lecture number 73, volume number 13, Virgil's Aeneid. Again, we've already pointed this out, the ironies of some of the selections that were made in the Harvard Classics. For example, the Iliad, Homer's Iliad, not included as a volume, and yet here we will have Virgil's Aeneid, which will come first. Now, if you haven't been following our stuff on learnstrong.net, I certainly recommend that you do so. The previous lectures, 1 through 72, are available there down the left-hand side in the Harvard Classics. We have already given a full series of lectures on Virgil's Aeneid. It can be found there in the AP folder. If you go to the AP folder on learnstrong.net and scroll down, you will find, along with lectures over the Iliad as well as the Odyssey, Virgil's Aeneid. And I certainly recommend that you would study that information closely in fact, that order. If you're serious about studying Virgil's Aeneid, you definitely need to know Homer's Iliad and Odyssey before you pick up the Aeneid. We worked with the great Robert Fagel's translation in all three of those lectures. We now turn to the Aeneid in what's referred to as the Dryden translation, John Dryden's translation of 1697. He was a contemporary of Milton. Of course, we've given lectures on Milton and Paradise Lost already. Think about it, Paradise Lost is 1667, and so here we are now with a 1697 translation, right? Also, Dryden was, as well, the translator of Plutarch's Lives that we were working with in the previous set of comments. Since we already know this poem, what I'm going to do is just enjoy some of my favorite lines from Dryden's translation. Again, we're going to briefly summarize the Aeneid, but this will be no lecture really on the Aeneid. We've already given that, as we've said. However, let's briefly summarize. I mean, the Aeneid can easily be divided up, as we've said in earlier lectures, into three parts. Books 1 through 4, of course, the great hero Aeneas there from the walls of Troy to Carthage, and of course the famous love story with Dido. Books 5 and 6, in Sicily, and of course the famous journey to the underworld. And in some ways, really, that is the key, where Aeneas is able to see his father Anchises, and as well, of course, get the future prophecies of how Rome will be this amazing place and an empire someday. And then finally, in books 7 through 12, these are, of course, the great battles that will consume the end, and of course, Aeneas' defeating of Turnus at the very end, and the debate, no question, about the idea that is it a heroic thing or not, because Turnus, gives himself up. Now, this translation begins actually with a 70-page dedication that is going to be Drydens' attempt to try to explain why it is that it's so important that he would translate the Aeneid. And then we'll begin itself. Now, let's work really quickly through each of the 12 books, and I'm just going to read a few lines. I'm not even going to mess around with line numbers. I'm just going to give you some of my favorite lines and passages, and my hope is that you get a flavor of the Dryden translation, and then maybe you can find it on your own. It is available online, by the way, for those of you that would like to study it. Of course, the first 11 lines, we will take a look at the invocation of the muse, no question, and of course the poem we're going to realize again is a poem about a man, obviously Aeneas, a town, obviously Rome, and a people, the Roman people. Juno, of course, will hate the Trojans. Aeolus' storm will blow him off course. Aeneas ends up in Carthage. Aeneas and Achates, his pal, will see Venus, of course, who is Aeneas' mother. And the question is, why can't we ever talk, right? Aeneas will see the beautiful art portrayed of the fall of Troy 7 years prior. And then finally, Aeneas is with Dido. She is, of course, the Phoenician fugitive, as we talked about in those prior lectures. And then finally, you have Venus with Cupid, and Cupid disguised as Ascanius or Aeolus, the son of Aeneas, and Dido will actually set him in her lap, and Dido, of course, will fall in love. No choice, in fact, to fall in love or not. Well, let's begin with just some of the lines. I'll just read the opening lines. This is Dryden's translation. Arms and the man I sing, who, forced by fate and haughty Juno's unrelenting hate, expelled and exiled, left the Trojan shore, long labors both by sea and land he bore, and in the doubtful war, before he won the Latian realm and built the destined town, his banished gods restored to rights divine, and settled sure succession in his line. From thence the race of Alban fathers come, and the long glories of majestic Rome. O Muse, the causes and the crimes relate. What goddess was provoked, and whence her hate? For what offense the Queen of Heaven began to persecute so brave, so just a man, involved his anxious life in endless cares, exposed to wants and hurried into wars? Can heavenly minds such high resentment show, or exercise their spite in human woe? Wonderful, wonderful stuff. A few lines later, we'll get Aeneas' very first words when he will say, "Endure and conquer. Jove will soon dispose to future good our past and present woes. With me, the rocks of Scylla you have tried, the human Cyclops at his den defied. What greater ills hereafter can you bear? Resume your courage and dismiss your care. An hour will come with pleasure to relate your sorrows past as benefits of fate. Through various hazards and events we move to Latium in the fields and the realms foredoomed by Jove, called to the seat the promise of the skies, where Trojan kingdoms once again may rise. Endure the hardships of their present state. Live and reserve yourselves for better fate." And then just a few lines later, Venus speaking to Jove, "O King of gods and men, whose awful hand disperses thunder on the seas and land, disposing all with absolute command, how could my pious son thy power incense? Or what, alas, is vanished Troy's offense? Our hope of Italy not only lost, on various seas by various tempest tossed, but shut from every shore and barred from every coast. You promised once a progeny divine of Romans rising from the Trojan line, and every times and after times should hold the world in awe, and to the land and ocean give the law. How is your doom reversed? Where eased my care when Rome was ruined in that cruel war?" Obviously the fall of Troy. "Then fates to fates I could oppose. But now, when fortune still pursues her former blow, what can I hope? What worse can still succeed? What end of labors has your will decreed?" Fun stuff. Just a few lines later, Zeus will respond, "No, I have," he says, "searched the mystic rolls of fate. Thy son, nor is the appointed season far. In Italy shall rage successful war, shall tame fierce nations in the bloody field, and sovereign laws impose and cities build, till after every foe subdued, the sun thrice through the signs his annual race shall run. This is his time prefixed. Ascanius then, now called Ilios, shall begin his reign. He 30 rolling years the crown shall wear. Then from Lavinium shall the seat transfer, and with hard labor Alba Longa build." And then a few lines later, "The people Romans call the city Rome. To them no bounds of empire I assign, nor term of years to their immortal line. Even haughty Juno, who with endless broils earth and seas and heaven and Jove himself turmoils. At length, atoned, her friendly power shall join to cherish and advance the Trojan line. The subjects' world shall Rome's dominion own, and prostrate shall adore the nation of the grown. An age is ripening in revolving fate, when Troy shall overturn the Grecian state, and sweet revenge her conquering son shall call to crush the people that conspired her fall. Then Caesar from the Julian stock shall rise, whose empire ocean and whose fame the skies alone shall bound, whom, fraught with eastern spoils, our heaven, the just reward of human toils, securely shall repay with rights divine, and increase shall ascend upon his sacred shrine. Then dire debate and impious war shall cease, and the stern age be softened into peace. Then banished faith shall once more again return in vestal fires, and hallowed temples burn." Well, this is some of the great examples of Drydens' poetry. Let's go quickly, book 2. Of course, this is a book, I wish I could just read the whole thing. This is obviously the fall of Troy, the story that is told. Aeneas, of course, the carrying of his father Anchises, and Ascanius holding on to the hand. He leaves as Creusa, his wife. All of those major stories are there. Let me just jump through a few places here of some beautiful poetry that Dryden will translate for us. He's talking now outside the walls of Troy and bringing the Trojan horse in. We're told, "O sacred city," they're dancing around the horse. "O sacred city built by hands divine, O valiant heroes of the Trojan line. 4 times he struck, as oft the clashing sound of arms was heard, and inward groans rebound. This is Lycaon's, just after he's jacked, as we said in earlier lectures. Yet mad with zeal and blinded with our fate, we haul along the horse in solemn state. The idea, of course, that they bring the horse into the city, even though, of course, it's going to be their inn. A few lines later, Troy is no more, and Ilium was a town. The fatal day, the appointed hour, has come when wrathful Jove's irrevocable doom transfers the Trojan state to Grecian hands. The fire consumes the town. The foe commands an armed hosts. An unexpected force break from the bowels of the fatal horse. And then just a few lines later, brave soul, said I, but brave, alas, in vain. Come, finish what our cruel fates ordain. You see the desperate state of our affairs, and heaven's protecting powers are deaf to prayers. The passive gods behold the Greeks defile their temples and abandon to the spoil their own abodes. We, feeble few, conspire to save a sinking town involved in fire. Then let us fall, but fall amidst our foes. Despair of life the means of living shows. So bold a speech encouraged their desire of death and added fuel to their fire. The beauty of the poetry matched, of course, in the translation, as we have to witness then the fall of the city. And then just a few lines later, perhaps you may of Priam's fate inquire. He, when he saw his regal town on fire, his ruined palace, and his entreating foes on every side, inevitable woes, and arms disused, invest his limbs decayed, like them with age, a late and useless aid. His feeble shoulders scarce the weight sustain, loaded, not armed, he creeps along with pain, despairing of success, ambitious to be slain. A few lines later, of course, Hecuba, the queen, will make her comment. She said, and with a last salute embraced the poor old man, and by the laureled place, behold, Polites, one of Priam's sons, pursued by Pyrrhus, there for safety runs. And then, of course, we have the amazing story of the death of the king by Pyrrhus, right? And Pyrrhus will, of course, at the end of this say, go thou from me to fate, and to my father my foul deeds relate. Now die. And with that, he dragged the trembling sire, slittering through cloydered blood and holy mire. The mingled pace his murdered son had made, hauled from beneath the violated shade, and on the sacred pile the roll and the royal victim laid. His right hand held his bloody falchion bare, his left he twisted in his hoary hair. Then with a speeding thrust his heart he found. The lukewarm blood came rushing through the wound, and sanguine streams disdained the sacred ground. Thus Priam fell, and shared one common fate with Troy in ashes and his ruined state. He, who the scepter of all Asia swayed, whom monarchs like domestic slaves obeyed, on the bleak shore now lies the abandoned king, a headless carcass and a nameless thing. Truly, truly beautiful language. Of course, we have as well Venus speaking to her son, my son, from whence this madness, this neglect of my commands and those whom I protect? Why this unmanly rage? Recall to mind whom you forsake. What pledges leave behind? Look, if your helpless father yet survive, or if Ascanius or Creusa live. In other words, the suggestion then being made, you got to take care of your family. What are you doing, right? And then finally, at the very end of this book, just a couple of lines. Thus ordaining all the prudence could provide, yellow spoils, then on my bending back the welcome load of my dear father take, while on my better hand Ascanius hung, and with unequal paces tripped along, Creusa kept behind. By choice we stray through every dark and every devious way. I, who so bold and dauntless just before the Grecian darts and shock of lances bore, at every shadow now am seized with fear, not for myself, but for the charge I bear, till near the ruined gate arrived at last, secure and deeming all the danger past. A frightful noise of trampling feet we hear. My father, looking through the shades with fear, cried out, haste, haste, my son, the foes are nigh. Their swords and shining armor I descry. Some hostile god, for some unknown offense, had sure bereft my mind of better sense, for while through winding ways I took my flight, and sought the shelter of the gloomy night, alas, I lost Creusa. Hard to tell if by her fatal destiny she fell, or weary sate, or wandered with affright, but she was lost forever to my sight. I knew not, or reflected till I met my friends at Creusa's now deserted seat, We met, not one was wanting. Only she deceived her friends, her son, and wretched me. Well, again, I wish I could read more of this. Let's jump over to book 3. Of course, Aeneas and the Trojans leave Troy. They go to Delos, where, of course, Apollo is going to tell them to search for the ancient homeland, and Chryses ultimately will die in Sicily, and Aeneas' story ultimately will end. I'll just read one set of lines here from book 3. At the very end, the sadness about his passing of his father. Here, after endless labors, often tossed by raging storms and driven on every coast, my dear, dear father, spent with age, I lost ease of my cares and solace of my pain, saved through 1,000 toils, but saved in vain. Well, of course, book 4 is the Jack of Dido, as we've talked about it in earlier lectures. Like the fall of Rome, the tragedies just mount. And the opening lines, listen to how Dryden translates the opening lines of book 4. But anxious cares already seized the queen. She fed within her veins a flame unseen. The hero's valor acts and birth inspire her soul with love and fan the secret fire. His words, his looks, imprinted in her heart, improve the passion and increase the smart. Of course, we know how this whole project's going to go down. Early on in the book, as we know, Dido walking through the city of Carthage, sick with desire and seeking him she loves, from street to street, the raving Dido roves. So when the watchful shepherd from the blind wounds with a random shaft this careless hind, distracted with her pain, she flies the woods, bounds over the lawn, and seeks the silent floods with fruitless care, for still the fatal dart sticks in her side and rankles in her heart. Beautiful, beautiful poetry. A few lines later, we hear the moment in the cave, the famous liaison. Meantime, the gathering clouds obscure the skies. From pole to pole, the forky lightning flies, the rattling thunders roll. Juno pours a wintry deluge down, and sounding showers. The company disperse to converts ride, and seek the homely copse or mountain's hollow side. The rapid rains, and descending from the hills, to rolling torrents raise the creeping rills. The queen and prince, as love or fortune guides, one common cavern in her bosom hides. Then fast the trembling earth the signal gave, and flashing fires enlighten all the cave. Hell from below and Juno from above, and howling nymphs were conscious of their love. From this ill-omened hour in time arose debate and death, and all succeeding woes. This word woes makes us think, of course, about Milton's Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, which taste brought mortal death and all our woes, right? Same gig being played. I'll jump to a few more lines. But soon the queen perceives the thin disguise. What arts can blind a jealous woman's eyes? She was the first to find the secret fraud. Dido, recognizing she's soon to be jilted. Before the fatal news was blazed abroad, love the first motions of the lover hears, quick to presage, and even in safety fears. Nor impious fame was wanting to report the ships repaired, the Trojans thick restored, and purpose to forsake the Trojan court. Frantic with fear, impatient of the wound, and impotent of mind, she roves the city round. I'll jump just a few lines later when she's nailing him, yelling at him. She says it this way: false as thou art, and more than false, forsworn, nor sprung from noble blood, nor goddess born, but hewn from hardened entrails of a rock. What a great line. Hewn from hardened entrails of a rock. And then just a few lines later: what pangs the tender breast of Dido tore, when from the tower she saw the covered shore, and heard the shouts of sailors from afar, mixed with the murmurs of the watery war. All powerful love. By the way, there's all kinds of exclamation points in this translation. What changes canst thou cause in human hearts, subjected to thy laws? Beautiful. Truly beautiful poetry. And then finally at the very end, and again, I would love to be able to read all of this to you, the last words of Dido. Dear pledges of my love, while heaven's so pleased, receive a soul of mortal anguish eased. My fatal course is finished, and I go, a glorious name among the ghosts below. A lofty city by my hands is raised, Pygmalion punished, and my lord appeased. What could my fortune have afforded more, had the false Trojan never touched my shore? Then kiss the couch, and must I die, she said, and unrevenged? 'Tis doubly to be dead. Yet even in this death with pleasure I receive on any terms, it's better than to live. These flames from far may the false Trojan view, these boding omens his base flight pursue. Brilliant, brilliant stuff, beautiful stuff. Book 5, of course, Aeneas to Sicily, and the sports activities are a huge part of that, as we've said, and of course the Ghost of Anchises, where Aeneas is told by his father, you have to meet the Sibyl, and ultimately you got to go into the underworld. I'll just give you the opening lines of Book 5. Meantime, of course, the Trojans are sailing away and they see the fire, right? The pyre that is Dido's pyre. Meantime, the Trojan, Aeneas, cuts his watery way, fixed on his voyage through the curling sea, then casting back his eyes with dire amaze, sees on the Punic shore the mounting blaze, the cause unknown. And yet his presaging mind the fate of Dido from the fire divined. He knew the stormy souls of womankind, where secret springs their eager passions move, how capable of death for injured love. Dire auguries from hence the Trojans draw, till neither fires nor shining shores they saw. The use of that rhyme couplet is so amazing in Drydens.